A Mexican town banned mirrors for 100 years. Here's why. I first set foot in San Jacinto on a humid, stifling afternoon in late July, when the sun beat down like an accusatory glare from a vengeful deity. I had heard murmurs of a peculiar custom, a total absence of reflective surfaces, and my academic curiosity, mingled with a personal fascination for folklore, propelled me into this remote town in the highlands of Mexico. I had spent years combing through dusty manuscripts and oral histories, and the story of San Jacinto's ban on mirrors was one I could not resist. I needed to see for myself what had driven an entire community to renounce such a common household item for over a century. From the moment I arrived, I sensed an unspoken tension lurking beneath the everyday rhythm of life. The narrow cobbled streets were lined with adobe houses, each adorned with vibrant murals and colorful hand-painted talismans. Yet, curiously, every dwelling was conspicuously devoid of mirrors, polished windows, or any reflective surfaces. Even the small storefronts in the modest parish church bore no sign of glass reflecting a soul's image. Instead, residents relied on framed paintings or handcrafted reliefs to capture their likenesses, a tradition they claimed had preserved their sanity and protected them from unspeakable horrors. I remember my first encounter with Don Emilio, a wizened old man whose eyes seemed to carry the weight of 100 lifetimes. He invited me into his modest home, a space sparsely decorated but suffused with an almost palpable reverence. Over cups of strong, bitter coffee, he began to share with me the dark legend that had haunted San Jacinto for generations. In a trembling whisper, he recounted the tale of a child whose laughter once echoed in these very streets, snatched away by something that slithered forth from the depths of a mirror. It was not a being of this world, he said, voice quivering, but a creature born of our fears, our guilt, and our darkest secrets. It waited, hidden behind the glass, for the day when a mirror would be returned to us, and I fear that day is coming. I listened, enraptured and unnerved. According to the law, more than 100 years ago, San Jacinto had been plagued by misfortune. Children began to vanish without a trace, and in the wake of their disappearances, the community's suffering deepened. It was said that one ill-fated night, during a torrential downpour of sorrow and regret, a mirror, a gift from a wandering traveler, had been introduced into the town. That night, as lightning danced and thunder roared, something stirred in the mirror's reflection. In a moment of unspeakable horror, a hand, gaunt and shadowy, reached out from the silvery surface and plucked a young child from his bed. The child's disappearance marked the beginning of a century-long curse. Fearful of the mirror's power, the elders decreed that all reflective surfaces be destroyed, buried, or banished from sight. In their desperation to break the cycle of terror, the townsfolk believed that the mirror's existence invited the creature's return. In the weeks that followed, I wandered the town, absorbing its mysteries and contradictions. The locals, while kind and welcoming in their own reserved manner, spoke in hushed tones about the past. I noticed that every conversation would eventually veer away from the subject of mirrors, as if mentioning them might hasten a dreadful prophecy. I even observed that children, with their wide, innocent eyes, seemed to instinctively avoid certain corners of the town, shaded alcoves where the remnants of shattered glass lay like remnants of a forgotten nightmare. One evening, as twilight draped the town in hues of deep purple and bruised red, I found myself drawn to an ancient stone well at the town's edge. It was said that the well was once the site of clandestine rituals, a place where desperate prayers and pleas were offered to appease the restless spirit that haunted the mirror. I sat on the cool, weathered stones and listened to the whisper of the wind through the desiccated brush. In that eerie stillness, memories of Don Emilio's words resurfaced in my mind. The mirror waits, and it hungers for a reflection that is untainted by fear. I wondered, was it possible that the curse was more than just superstition? Could the mirror truly harbor a malevolent force? Days passed in a blur of surreal encounters. At dawn I roamed the bustling marketplace, where vendors hawked handmade crafts and fresh produce. Every now and then, my eyes caught a glint of something metallic, a stray shard here, a fragment there, but no full mirror. I began to wonder if these stray fragments were remnants of the cursed artifact or mere coincidences. One night, after a particularly vivid dream of faceless figures beckoning me from dark corridors, I awoke to find a small, ornate shard lying on my bedside table. It was a piece of mirror glass, edged in delicate silver filigree. My heart hammered as I held it, its surface reflecting only my own startled expression, distorted by trembling hands. I recalled the legends, that even a fragment of a mirror might serve as a beacon for the creature. Yet a part of me, the skeptical, rational part, insisted that my mind was playing tricks on me, that the legend was nothing more than folklore spun from collective trauma. The following morning, I sought out Señora Rosa, the local historian who was known for her encyclopedic knowledge of San Jacinto's past. In her modest home, adorned with sepia-toned photographs and ancient documents, she told me more about the legend. "Hace muchos años," she began, her voice soft and deliberate. "Our ancestors believed that the mirror was a portal, a thin veil between our world and a realm of despair. The creature that emerged was not merely a thief of children, it was the embodiment of our collective sins and regrets. Each disappearance was a sacrifice demanded by the mirror to balance the scales of destiny. Our people, in their desperation, vowed never to bring that evil back." Señora Rosa's words painted a picture of a community living in the shadow of a curse that was both physical and metaphysical. She explained that every year on the anniversary of the first disappearance, a ritual was held in secret. We gather, in the dead of night, to offer prayers and to burn offerings, small tokens of our remorse and hope that the creature remains forever confined to its glass prison. She paused, her eyes flickering with an unspoken sorrow. But there are whispers among the elders that the creature's hunger grows with each passing year, that it seeks not only to claim a child but to shatter the fragile balance between our world and the abyss. I left Señora Rosa's home with a heavy heart, the weight of centuries-old grief pressing upon me. The more I learned, the more I felt an inexplicable pull, a morbid curiosity to confront the very heart of the legend. I began to wonder if the warnings were not merely about preserving a tradition, but about containing an ancient evil that might one day spill forth and consume us all. My days were filled with conversations and careful observations, each moment a delicate dance between fascination and dread. One sultry afternoon, I met a young local, Miguel, who had grown up in the shadow of the curse. His eyes were bright yet haunted, and his voice trembled as he recounted childhood memories of strange occurrences. "When I was little," he said softly, "I would sometimes see a glimmer in the distance, a fleeting reflection that wasn't mine. I'd run to my grandmother and ask her about it, but she would hush me and say, 'It's best not to look into things that you cannot understand.' His tale sent shivers down my spine, as if the mere act of recollection was summoning the echoes of that long-forgotten terror. As night fell on San Jacinto, I found myself alone in my rented room at a modest inn near the center of town. The room was sparse, no mirrors, no reflective surfaces, but the absence only amplified my unease. I laid awake listening to the rhythmic drip of water from an unseen source, my thoughts swirling with visions of dark figures and shattered glass. I questioned whether the legends were a manifestation of a collective psychological burden, or if there was something more tangible lurking at the boundaries of our perception. It was during one of these sleepless nights that I experienced something inexplicable. I had drifted in and out of a restless sleep when I became aware of a faint, rhythmic tapping. At first, I dismissed it as a trick of the wind against the old wooden beams. But as the sound grew louder and more insistent, I sat up, straining my ears. The tapping came from beneath the floorboards, a measured, almost deliberate sound that echoed in the stillness. My pulse quickened. Had the creature found a way to breach my sanctuary? I remembered the shard I had found, the piece of mirror that now lay hidden in my suitcase. Could it have drawn the creature's attention? I crept out of bed and approached the door, every creak of the old wood making my heart leap into my throat. The corridor was dimly lit by a single flickering bulb, and the sound of the tapping was now accompanied by a low, almost inaudible whisper, as if the walls themselves were speaking in tongues. I froze, straining to discern the words, but they faded into an indistinct murmur. Gathering every ounce of courage, I stepped toward the source of the sound, which led me to a forgotten corner of the inn, a storage area filled with old furniture and relics from another era. There, amidst a jumble of dusty antiques, lay an ancient mirror frame, its ornate carvings dulled by time and neglect. No glass remained, only the empty frame, a relic of a bygone era when mirrors were commonplace. I recalled the warnings of the townsfolk, that even a fragment of a mirror could beckon the creature. My mind raced with possibilities. Had someone hidden this frame deliberately, hoping to appease the curse? Or was it merely a forgotten remnant of a past long sealed away? I couldn't tell. That night, as I returned to my room, I couldn't shake the sensation that I was being watched. Every shadow seemed to hide a secret, every silence a prelude to a revelation. The following morning, I resolved to speak with Father Manuel, the local priest, who was reputed to have spiritual insight into the town's peculiar customs. In his modest chapel, filled with the faint scent of incense and the soft rustling of ancient prayers, Father Manuel welcomed me with a kindly smile. Yet behind his gentle demeanor, I sensed a guarded sadness. "I know why you are troubled," he said in measured tones as we sat beneath a stained glass window. Ironically, one of the few reflective surfaces allowed in the sacred space. Our faith teaches us that evil comes in many forms. What we have suffered in San Jacinto is not merely the loss of innocent children. It is a fracture in the very fabric of our souls. He paused, his eyes reflecting a mix of sorrow and determination. The mirror was a conduit, a gateway for that darkness. And though we banished mirrors, the fear and the guilt remain, festering in our hearts. Father Manuel explained that the ritual performed each year was an act of collective atonement, a desperate attempt to contain the darkness and to remind the spirit of its unfulfilled hunger. But, he warned, if someone were to introduce a mirror, if the cycle were completed, the creature would be released in full, and the balance between our world and the abyss would be irreparably shattered. His words struck me with the force of an omen, and I couldn't help but wonder, was my own presence, my relentless probing into the town's secrets, inadvertently drawing me closer to that forbidden relic? The days that followed became a blur of anxious encounters and whispered warnings. I began to notice subtle signs. An old woman clutching a small, hand-carved talisman as she passed me on the street. A child who nervously averted his eyes when I mentioned the word mirror. And at night, inexplicable cold drafts that swept through the corridors of my inn, as if something unseen was trailing my every step. The line between folklore and reality blurred, and I felt as if I were teetering on the edge of a nightmare from which escape was impossible. One humid afternoon, I found myself wandering the outskirts of San Jacinto, drawn by an irresistible compulsion to explore the ruins of what once had been a grand hacienda. The crumbling structure was overgrown with wild vines, its once elegant arches now sagging under the weight of decay. In a dusty room near the back, I discovered a peculiar relic, an old cracked mirror hidden beneath a tattered cloth. Its surface was marred by time, yet in its depths I could see a faint, ghostly reflection that did not match my own. The reflection was that of a small child, eyes wide with terror, silently pleading for rescue. I staggered back, heart pounding, as the air around me seemed to grow heavy with foreboding. In that moment, I realized that the legend was not merely a tale to scare children or to enforce superstitions. It was a living, breathing curse, and I might have just triggered its resurgence. Clutching the mirror fragment in my trembling hands, I vowed to uncover the full truth behind the curse, even if it meant confronting the very darkness that had haunted this town for a century. I returned to San Jacinto with a renewed determination, seeking out anyone who might shed further light on the mystery. Late one evening, under a moonless sky, I joined a clandestine gathering in a secluded courtyard near the center of town. The participants, cloaked in traditional garments and carrying small offerings, gathered around a makeshift altar. The ritual was somber, a mixture of ancient indigenous chants and the fervent prayers of a people burdened by a legacy of loss. I watched in awe as they burned incense and murmured incantations designed to keep the malevolent spirit at bay. An elder, his face lined with sorrow and wisdom, locked eyes with me for a brief moment. "You carry the shard of the past," he said quietly, his voice trembling. "Beware, for the mirror's call is irresistible. It seeks not only to reclaim what was lost, but to claim a new life, a new soul." That night, sleep eluded me. I lay awake, the elder's words echoing in my mind. Every creak and whisper in the dark seemed laden with sinister intent. The mirror shard, hidden away in my satchel, pulsed as if it were alive. In my restless dreams, I saw images of the child from the hacienda, a spectral figure, beckoning me from a labyrinth of endless corridors lined with shattered glass. I awoke with a start, drenched in sweat, and the unmistakable feeling that the child's eyes were watching me from the darkness. Days turned into a frenetic race against time as I delved deeper into the town's history. I pored over ancient documents at the small local library, painstakingly cross-referencing oral histories with dusty archival records. I learned that the cursed mirror had once belonged to a wealthy family, whose lineage was steeped in mysticism and tragedy. According to the records, the mirror was rumored to have been a gift from an enigmatic traveler, a man shrouded in mystery who appeared at the town's gates on a stormy night. His eyes, they said, burned with an otherworldly fire, and his words promised fortune and protection. But as with all things touched by the supernatural, the gift came at a steep price. The mirror's arrival coincided with a series of misfortunes. Livestock dying inexplicably, crops failing, and most tragically, the disappearance of a young child who was cherished by the entire community. The more I uncovered, the more I sensed that the curse was an intricate tapestry, woven from threads of guilt, fear, and an unquenchable longing for redemption. The mirror, in all its tragic allure, was a symbol of the human desire to see oneself clearly, to confront one's inner demons. And yet, it had become the vessel of a horror too profound to bear. I began to understand that the act of banning mirrors was not merely an attempt to avert a supernatural calamity. It was a ritualistic act of self-preservation, a way for the community to sever ties with the painful reflection of their own past. One crisp morning, as I was making my way back from a long day of research, I encountered a young woman named Isabela on a quiet side street. Her eyes were a piercing, melancholic shade of green, and her presence seemed to radiate both sorrow and resilience. She confided in me that she, too, had been tormented by visions, fleeting glimpses of a spectral child in mirrors that had once graced her family's home before it was forced into silence. "My abuela always warned me," she whispered, "that mirrors are windows to our souls, and sometimes what we see there is more than just a reflection. It is a glimpse into a realm of regrets, lost innocence, and unspeakable horrors." Isabela's words resonated deeply with me. Here was another soul whose life had been irrevocably altered by the legacy of the mirror. As the days grew longer and the oppressive tension in San Jacinto deepened, I resolved that I could no longer remain a passive observer. I had come to this town to understand its secrets, but now I felt compelled to confront the darkness head-on. With Isabela's hesitant blessing, we embarked on a journey to the old hacienda, where I had first seen the spectral child. The path was treacherous, winding through dense thickets and over crumbling stone bridges that seemed to groan under the weight of history. Every step felt as though we were trespassing on sacred ground, disturbing the spirits of those who had suffered before us. Upon reaching the hacienda, we found it shrouded in an eerie silence. The once grand building was now a mausoleum of memories, a decaying relic of a time when the mirror's presence was both revered and reviled. In the dusty main hall, we discovered remnants of a lavish past, torn curtains, faded portraits, and a massive ornate mirror that still hung on the wall, albeit cracked and veiled in a thick layer of grime. Isabela's eyes widened in horror as she stared at it. "This is it," she murmured, "the mirror that doomed us all." I approached the mirror with a mixture of dread and determination. My hand trembled as I reached out to touch its surface. In that moment, I felt an electric jolt, as if I had been connected to a vast network of sorrow and despair spanning generations. The mirror's surface rippled like water disturbed by a stone, and for a fleeting second, I saw not my own reflection, but that of the child from my dreams. His eyes were filled with an anguished plea, as if he were begging to be freed from a prison of eternal torment. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I recalled Father Manuel's warning and the elder's ominous words. The mirror was not simply an inanimate object, but a portal, a gateway that had once unleashed a horror upon this town. Now, by coming here with my shard and our combined determination, were we unwittingly setting the stage for its resurrection? Isabela's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts. "We must do something," she said urgently. "If this mirror is the key, then we must find a way to seal it once and for all." We searched the hacienda for clues, a diary here, a letter there. In a dusty chest, we uncovered a tattered journal belonging to the mirror's original owner. The entries were a chaotic mixture of desperation and foreboding, recounting the slow descent into madness as the mirror's influence grew. One passage, written in a trembling scrawl, caught my attention. "The mirror shows not what is, but what could be, a realm of twisted reflections where our deepest fears come alive. I have seen my own sins and the faces of those I have wronged. I fear that by gazing into its depths, I have opened a door that should remain forever closed." The journal hinted at a ritual, a final act of contrition intended to sever the mirror's hold on the family, and by extension, on the town. The instructions were cryptic, involving the symbolic burning of a mirror shard at the stroke of midnight on the anniversary of the first disappearance. The ritual, it claimed, would not destroy the mirror entirely, but would confine the creature to a limbo from which it could never return. My heart pounded as I realized that the shard in my possession might be the very fragment required to complete the rite. That night, under a sky smeared with ink-black clouds, Isabela and I returned to the hacienda. The building loomed like a spectre against the horizon, its broken windows resembling hollow eyes that watched our every move. With the journal clutched in my hand, we navigated the shadowed corridors until we reached the main hall. There, beneath the cracked mirror, we arranged the shard on a makeshift altar we had fashioned from rubble and relics of the past. As the clock in the nearby church tolled midnight, a sound that reverberated through the empty corridors like the beating of a giant ancient heart, I began the incantation recorded in the journal. My voice wavered at first, but with each repetition of the archaic phrases, I felt a strange energy surging through the room. Isabela joined in, her voice merging with mine to create a haunting chorus that seemed to stir the very air. For a few long moments, time itself appeared to slow, and the silence was shattered only by the crackle of a small fire that we had kindled in a forgotten fireplace. Then, as the final words of the incantation left our lips, the shard began to glow with an otherworldly light. The glow intensified until it filled the hall with a spectral brilliance, and the mirror above us shuddered violently. I could feel a palpable force pressing against my skin, as if the very essence of despair were trying to break free. Suddenly, the glow surged upward, and the mirror shattered into 1,000 fragments, each piece sparkling like shards of a broken dream. The sound of shattering glass echoed in my ears, mingling with a wail that seemed to emanate from the depths of the abyss itself. I staggered back, clutching Isabela's hand as we both gazed in horror at the cascading fragments. For an agonizing moment, I thought I saw the spectral child emerging from one of the shards, a fleeting glimpse of sorrow and regret. And then, as if the vision were but a trick of the light, it vanished. The room fell silent once more, the oppressive presence lifted as if by an unseen hand. In the aftermath of the ritual, a profound stillness settled over the hacienda. The shattered mirror lay scattered on the floor, inert and harmless. Yet, I knew that the price for our small victory was steep. The ritual had confined the creature for now, but it was only a temporary reprieve, a pause in the inexorable cycle of fear and retribution that had plagued San Jacinto for generations. In the days that followed, I found the town strangely transformed. The palpable tension that had hung over San Jacinto seemed to have lifted, replaced by a cautious optimism. The people spoke more freely of their past, and the taboo surrounding mirrors appeared to be slowly, almost imperceptibly, fading away. Yet, I sensed that beneath this veneer of relief, the scars of the past remained, etched into the hearts of those who had lived through the darkness. I left San Jacinto with a heavy heart and a mind forever changed by what I had witnessed. The journey had taken me deep into the realm of folklore and ancient curses, forcing me to confront the dual nature of reflection, the desire to see ourselves clearly and the terror of facing the truths hidden within our souls. I carry with me the memory of the spectral child, the sorrow in the eyes of the elders, and the whispered warnings of a community that dared to defy a fate woven from centuries of fear and regret. Even now, as I recount these events in the quiet solitude of my study, I can still feel the echo of those long-forgotten voices. The mirror's shards lie hidden in a box, a silent testament to the battle between light and darkness, hope and despair. And on quiet nights, when the wind whispers through the trees, I sometimes wonder if the creature waits patiently for the day when a single, unguarded mirror might be returned. A day when the boundary between our world and that abyss is torn asunder once more. I have learned that some legends are not merely stories meant to be told around a campfire, but warnings carved into the collective memory of a people. The curse of San Jacinto is one such tale, a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous reflections are those that reveal the darkest corners of our own souls. As I close this chapter of my journey, I urge you to remember that not all mirrors are mere glass and silver. Some are doorways to the past, to our deepest fears, and to secrets best left undisturbed. And so, I bid farewell to San Jacinto, a town where the absence of mirrors was both a safeguard and a silent elegy to lost innocence. I walk away with the bittersweet knowledge that while we may banish the physical presence of an object, the memories, regrets, and echoes of ancient terrors linger on, forever imprinted on the souls of those who dare to remember. Perhaps one day, when the relentless march of time erodes the barriers between myth and reality, the mirror's call will resurface, beckoning a new generation to confront the shadows of their own making. Until that day, I hold close the hope that by acknowledging our fears, we might finally find the courage to face them, and in doing so, reclaim the light hidden behind even the darkest reflection.